The lights on the bridge of the horizon's edge flickered red. Warning sounds filled the air. Captain Minho Park gripped his chair as another blast hit their ship. "Hull damage on Deck 7, shouted Lieutenant Suna Lee from her station. "We're losing air fast." Gyeon Kim sat at her communication desk, her hands moving quickly over the controls. She was only 19 years old, but she had been training for this war her whole life. Around her, the bridge crew worked hard to keep their ship alive. "Captain, the Valeth flagship is moving closer," reported the sensor officer. "The Dominion's Wrath is charging its main weapons." Captain Park looked at the main screen. The enemy ship was huge, 10 times bigger than their own vessel. Its dark metal surface was covered with weapon ports that glowed with deadly energy. "All ships, fall back to defense line Beta." "Admiral Hyok." Nom's voice came through the speakers. "We cannot win this fight." But there was nowhere to run. The human fleet had only 12 ships left. The Valeth had brought over 40 vessels. To this battle, for 3 years, humanity had been losing this war. Today might be the day they lost everything. "Sir, our engines are failing," said the engineer. "We have maybe 10 minutes before complete shutdown." Gyeon watched her screen as human ships around them took heavy damage. The Morning Star exploded in a ball of fire. The New Hope was spinning out of control, its crew sending out distress calls. "Prepare escape pods," Captain Park ordered. His voice was calm, but Gyeon could see the sadness in his eyes. "All non-essential crew to evacuation stations." "What about the mission data?" Gyeon asked. She had been listening to Valeth communications for months, learning their language and studying their culture. Her computer held valuable information about how their enemy thought and fought. "Take it with you," Lieutenant Lee said, putting her hand on Gyeon's shoulder. "Maybe someone else can use it." The ship shook again. This time, the lights went out, completely. Emergency power kicked in, bathing everything in a red glow. "Hull breach, on Deck 5. Someone yelled. "We're venting atmosphere." Gyeon looked at her screen one more time. The Valeth flagship was so close now that she could see its fighter bays. Small alien ships were flying out like angry insects, hunting down human escape pods. "All crew, abandon ship immediately," Captain Park commanded. "This is not a drill." People ran past Juan toward the escape pod stations. Lieutenant Lee grabbed her arm. "Come on, Juan, we have to go now." But Juan did not move. She stared at her screen, watching the massive enemy ship. An idea was forming in her mind, a crazy, dangerous idea. "Gyeon," Lieutenant Lee called. "The pods are launching. We'll be left behind." "Go," Gyeon said quietly. "I'll catch the next one." Lieutenant Lee looked confused, but nodded. She ran toward the evacuation area. Soon, Gyeon was alone on the bridge with Captain Park and a few other officers. "Sir," the weapons officer said, "our guns are offline, we can't fight back." Captain Park nodded. "Then we die with honor." "At least we captain," Gyeon interrupted. "I have an idea, cadet." "There's no time for the fighter bay," she said quickly. "Is there still a working ship down there?" Captain Park frowned. "Maybe 1 or 2 damaged fighters. But they can't hurt that flagship. Those ships are too small." "I'm not planning to hurt it," Gyeon said. She stood up and faced her captain. "I'm planning to board it." The bridge went quiet except for the sound of alarms. Everyone stared at her. "That's suicide," the weapons officer said. "No," Gyeon replied. "It's the only chance we have." She ran to her station and grabbed her datapad. All her research about the Valeth was stored inside it. "Sir, I've been studying their culture for months. I know things about them that might help." "Cadet Kim, I cannot allow another explosion," rocked the ship. The artificial gravity flickered, making everyone float for a moment. "We're dead anyway," Gyeon said. "But if I can get aboard their flagship, maybe I can learn something useful. Maybe I can find a way to help our people." Captain Park looked at her for a long moment. Behind them, the last escape pods were launching. Soon, the horizon's edge would be empty. "The fighter bay is 3 decks down," he said finally. The lifts aren't working. I can climb, Giwan said. The captain reached into his pocket and pulled out a small device. Emergency beacon, he said, handing it to her. If you somehow survive this, we'll find you. Giwan took the device and clipped it to her uniform. Thank you, sir. She turned to leave, but Captain Park called her name. Giwan, why are you doing this? She thought about her answer. Because someone has to try something different. We can't win by fighting the same way we always have. Giwan ran from the bridge, leaving Captain Park and his remaining crew behind. The ship's corridors were dark and filled with smoke. She climbed down emergency ladders and crawled through damaged sections. When she reached the fighter bay, she found chaos. Most of the small ships were destroyed, but in the corner, she saw one fighter that looked like it might still work. Its hull was cracked, and one wing was bent. But the engines were still glowing. She climbed into the cockpit and started the systems. Many of the controls were broken, but the basic flight functions worked. Through the cockpit window, she could see the Valeth flagship getting closer. The fighter bay doors were already open to space. Giwan took a deep breath and launched her small ship into the battle. Around her, the last human ships were dying. She flew past burning wreckage and floating debris. The enemy fighters saw her tiny ship and turned to attack, but she was flying toward their flagship, something they did not expect. Unknown human vessel, came a voice in broken English. Surrender, or be destroyed. Giwan did not answer. She pushed her damaged fighter to maximum speed, heading straight for the massive ship ahead of her. The Valeth flagship filled her entire view now. Its dark surface covered with weapon ports and fighter bays. She aimed for what looked like a landing bay and held on tight. This was either going to save humanity, or it was going to be the shortest rescue mission in history. Behind her, the horizon's edge exploded in a flash of white light. Giwan's fighter crashed hard into the Valeth landing bay. Metal screamed against metal as her damaged ship slid across the alien floor. Sparks flew everywhere. The cockpit filled with smoke. When everything stopped moving, Giwan hung upside down. In her seat, blood ran from a cut on her forehead. Her left arm hurt badly, but she could still move it. She was alive. Around her, she heard strange sounds. Footsteps that were different from human ones. Voices speaking in the Valeth language, sounds like metal grinding against stone. She unbuckled her safety belt and fell to what was now the top of her cockpit. Her datapad was still clipped to her belt. The emergency beacon Captain Park gave her was blinking softly. Through the cracked cockpit window, she saw them coming. The Valeth looked like tall, thin humans, but their skin was gray like stone. They wore dark armor that seemed to absorb light. Their faces were narrow, with large black eyes that never seemed to blink. The aliens surrounded her crashed fighter. With their weapons raised, these were not the cheap guns she had seen in human intelligence reports. These weapons looked powerful and well-made. One of the Valeth stepped forward. His armor had more decorations than the others, which meant he was probably their leader. He spoke in his own language first, then switched to broken English. Human, why do you come here? Giwan pushed against the cockpit door, but it would not open. The alien leader made a gesture, and two of his soldiers pulled the door open with their bare hands. The metal bent like soft clay. They dragged her out. Roughly, she tried to stand, but her legs were weak from the crash. One of the soldiers held her up, while another pointed a weapon at her head. I am Subcommander Crixon, the leader said. His English was better than the others, but still strange to hear. You are now prisoner of the Valeth Empire. Giwan looked around the landing bay. It was huge, bigger than her entire ship had been. The walls were covered with symbols that glowed with soft blue light. Everything was clean and organized in ways that showed military discipline. What is your name, human? Crixon asked. Cadet Jawan Kim, she said. Her voice was hoarse from the smoke. Kim, you crashed your ship into our vessel. This was suicide attack, yes? No, Jawan said. I came here on purpose, but I did not want to die. The aliens looked at each other. She could see confusion in their large black eyes. One of them spoke to Crixon in their own language. The sounds were harsh and quick. "My soldiers think you lie," Crixon said. "No human has ever boarded Valath command ship. It is impossible." "But I am here," Jiwan pointed out. Sub-Commander Crixon walked around her slowly, studying her like she was a strange animal. "You are very young. Why did your commanders send child to die?" "They did not send me. I came on my own." This seemed to surprise him even more. He spoke to his soldiers again. Their conversation grew more heated. Finally, he turned back to her. "You will come with us. War Commander Vexara will want to see this strange human who flies into death but lives." Soldiers grabbed her arms and started walking. The corridor they entered was nothing like human ships. The walls curved in smooth lines, and the floor felt warm under her feet. Soft lights moved along the ceiling like water flowing uphill. As they walked, Giwan saw more Valath. Some were soldiers like her guards, but others wore different clothes, scientists, maybe, or engineers. They all stopped what they were doing to stare at her. "You are famous now," Crixon said, noticing their attention. "No enemy has ever walked these halls." They passed rooms full of alien technology, computers with no buttons or screens, just floating lights that changed colors, weapons that looked like they were grown instead of built. Everything was beautiful in a cold alien way. "How long have you been fighting humans?" Joanne asked. Crixon looked surprised by the question. "3 of your years." "Why do you ask?" "I want to understand. In my language, there is a word, enemy. But I think your word is different." "Our word is Velkath," he said. "It means those who fight against the natural order." "What is the natural order?" The alien stopped walking. His soldiers stopped, too, looking confused by this conversation. "The strong rule, the weak serve. This is how universe works," Crixon said. "Your people fight against this truth." "Maybe," Guon said. "Or, maybe we just see the universe differently." They reached a large door that opened without anyone touching it. Inside was what looked like a medical room. Strange machines hung from the ceiling like metal spiders. "You are injured," Crixon said. "Our healers will fix you before you meet War Commander." "Why?" Jiwan asked. "Why not just let me die?" "Because War Commander Vexara must understand why you came here. Dead humans tell no secrets." A new alien entered the room. This one was smaller than the soldiers, with different colored skin, more blue than gray. It wore white robes instead of armor. "I am Healer Nexara," it said in much better English than the others. "I will treat your wounds." The healer's hands moved over strange devices. Lights scanned Giwan's body, and she felt a warm tingling where she was hurt. The pain in her arm faded away. The cut on her head stopped bleeding. "Your people healed differently than we expected," the healer said. "Your body is ... Interesting. How so?" "You recover faster than our reports suggested, and your brain patterns." The healer looked at its machines. "You are not afraid, Sub-Commander." Crixon stepped forward. "Not afraid, she should be terrified. She is alone on enemy ship, surrounded by superior force." "I am afraid," Guan said honestly. "But fear does not help me now. I need to think clearly." "Think about what Crixon asked. About why you are fighting this war. About what you really want. About whether there might be a better way." The room grew quiet. Even the healer stopped working and stared at her. "Better way," Crixon repeated. "There is only victory or defeat. Only strong or weak, is there?" Giwan asked. "In 3 years of fighting, have you gotten what you wanted?" Before Crixon could answer, a new voice filled the room. It spoke in the Valath language, but the tone was clearly that of a commander giving orders. "War Commander Vexara calls for the human," Crixon translated. "You will meet him now." As they prepared to leave the medical room, Giwan noticed something important. The way the other aliens looked at Crixon when the War Commander spoke, the way they straightened their posture and focused their attention. Their society was built on hierarchy and respect for authority. Everything she had studied about their culture was proving true, and that knowledge might be the key to everything. she said, as they walked toward the command center. May I ask you something? You may ask, I may not answer. Do you enjoy this war? Crixon was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was softer than before. Enjoyment is not the purpose of war, he said. Duty is the purpose of war. But Giwan heard something else in his voice, something that sounded almost like doubt. The command center of the Dominion's Wrath was the most impressive room Giwan had ever seen. The ceiling stretched high above her head, covered with star maps that moved like living things. Dozens of Valeth officers worked at stations that glowed with soft light. At the center of it all stood War Commander Dexara. He was taller than the other aliens, with silver markings on his gray skin that showed his high rank. His armor was black and polished to a mirror shine. When he looked at Giwan, his dark eyes seemed to see right through her. So, he said in perfect English, "This is the human who thinks she can fly into the heart of our fleet and live." The other officers in the room stopped their work to watch. Giwan could feel their attention like heat from a fire. Sub-Commander Crixon pushed her forward until she stood just a few steps away from the War Commander. I am War Commander Vex, Supreme Leader of this vessel and Destroyer of 17 human worlds, he said. You are a child playing at war. Why should I not kill you now? Giwan looked around the command center. She saw the tactical displays showing human ships retreating. She saw the weapons controls that could destroy entire planets. She saw the chain of command, how every alien in the room looked to Dexara for guidance. Because killing me would bring you no honor, she said quietly. The room went completely silent. Even the soft humming of the ship's engines seemed to pause. War Commander Vexara, S eyes narrowed. Honor, he repeated. You speak of honor to me, human child. I speak of Velthara, Giwan said, using the Valeth word she had learned. From months of studying their transmissions, the reaction was immediate. Several officers stepped backward. Sub-Commander Crixon made a sound like choking. Battlemaster Veloth, a scarred veteran standing near the tactical displays, turned to stare at her with wide eyes. Impossible, Veloth said in the Valeth language. Then he switched to English. No outsider knows the sacred words. War Commander Dexara walked slowly around Giwan, studying her like a hunter studying prey. Where did you learn this word, human? I have been listening to your communications for many months, Giwan said. I have studied your culture, your history, your laws. I know what Velthara means. Then you know it means death, Dexara said coldly. No, Giwan replied. It means truth through honor. It is the ancient way your people used to solve disputes between equals. Battlemaster Veloth stepped forward. She is not our equal. She is prey animal from weak species. Am I? Giwan asked. She looked directly at War Commander Vexara. I flew alone into your fleet. I crashed into your flagship and survived. I stand here in your command center, surrounded by your best soldiers, and I am not begging for my life. Does this sound like a prey animal to you? The War Commander was quiet. For a long moment, around the room, his officers waited for his decision. You request Velthara, he asked finally. I do. Do you understand what this means? If I accept, you must prove your words are true. If you fail, you die. If you succeed, ... Double quotes, he paused. If you succeed, I must listen to what you have to say. I understand. Battlemaster Veloth moved closer to the War Commander. Sir, this is trap. Humans are clever and dishonest. Do not allow this. But Sub-Commander Crixon spoke up. Battlemaster, the law is clear. If she requests Velthara and shows courage, we must honor the ancient ways. The ancient ways are for our people, not for enemies, Veloth argued. But she is here, Crixon said. No enemy has ever stood in this room before. Perhaps the ancient ways apply because she has done something no one thought possible. War Commander Dexara raised his hand for silence. The request has been made according to proper form. I cannot refuse without bringing shame to our bloodline. He looked at Giwan. But understand this, human Velthara is not just words. You must prove your honor through action. What action? Joanne asked. You must tell me something that only an honorable warrior would know. Something that shows you understand the weight of what you ask. Giwon took a deep breath. This was the moment everything depended on. All her months of study, all her listening to Valith communications, had been leading to this. War Commander, she said, you are fighting this war, but you did not start it. The alien's expression did not change, but she saw something flicker in his eyes. Your political leaders on the homeworld decided to attack humanity. They told you we were a threat to the natural order. But you have been fighting us for 3 years, and what have you learned? Speak plainly, Vexera commanded. You have learned that we are not what they said we were. We do not fight like cowards. We do not surrender when defeated. We protect our weak instead of abandoning them. This troubles you, because it means the politicians lied. Battlemaster Veloth took a step toward Juan, his hand on his weapon. How can you know this? Because I have been listening to your private communications. I have heard the discussions between your officers. I know that Battlemaster Veloth himself said that humans fight with unexpected honor for a weak species. Veloth froze. His hand tightened on his weapon, but he did not draw it. I know that Subcommander Crixon has questioned why we continue to protect our evacuation ships instead of abandoning the wounded. I know that War Commander Vexera has sent reports to the homeworld saying that human behavior does not match the intelligence briefings. The room was so quiet that Giwon could hear her own heartbeat. Every alien in the command center was staring at her. Most importantly, she continued, I know that 3 months ago, War Commander Vexera requested permission to open negotiations with humanity. The homeworld refused and ordered him to continue the attack. War Commander Vexera Space showed no emotion, but his silence told G1 she was right. This war is not about strength versus weakness, she said. It is about politicians who wanted a quick victory and military leaders who are too honorable to abandon their duty, even when that duty conflicts with their conscience. Even if this is true, Veloth said, we are soldiers, we follow orders. Do you, Guan asked, or do you follow honor? Because if you follow honor, then you must ask yourself, is it honorable to continue a war that was started with lies? Sub-Commander Crixon stepped forward. War Commander, she speaks Velthara. Her words have the weight of truth. Her words have the weight of death if she is wrong, Veloth countered. War Commander Vexera walked to the main display, where the tactical situation showed the retreating human fleet. His officers watched him, waiting for his decision. You claim to know our honor codes, he said to G1. Then you know what happens next. Yes. You must decide if my words are true. If they are, then Velthara demands that you hear my proposal. And what is your proposal, human child? Gyuan looked around the command center one more time, at the officers who had spent 3 years fighting her people, at the weapons that could destroy worlds, at the tactical displays showing human ships fleeing. In defeat, I propose that we end this war not with victory or defeat, but with understanding. I propose that you and I find a way to give both our peoples what they really want, peace with honor. The war commander turned from the display to face her. For a long moment, he studied her face. And if I refuse, then you kill me, and the war continues until one of our peoples is destroyed. Your politicians get their victory or their glorious defeat. But your honor, and the honor of every warrior in this room, remains stained by fighting a war built on lies. The silence that followed seemed to last forever. Finally, War Commander Vexara spoke. Battlemaster Veloth, Sub-Commander Crixon, clear the command center. I would speak with this human alone. As the other officers filed out, Giwon knew she had won the first battle. Now came the hard part, convincing the most powerful military leader in the Valith Empire to do something that had never been done before. The door closed, leaving her alone with War Commander Vexera and the weight of 2 civilizations' futures. War Commander Vexera stood with his back to Giwon, looking at the tactical display. The human fleet was almost gone now, just a few damaged ships limping away into deep space. His victory was complete. But he did not look like a winner. You know much about us, he said without turning around. Too much for a simple cadet. I have been studying your people since the war began, Juan replied. Not just your military tactics, but your culture, your history, your beliefs. Why? Because my commanders always taught us to know our enemy. But the more I learned about the Valith, the more I wondered if we were really enemies at all. Vexera finally turned to face her. Up close, she could see that his silver markings were not decorations, they were scars from old battles. Think we are not enemies? We have killed millions of your people, and we have killed millions of yours, Giwan said. But killing does not make us natural enemies. It just makes us people who are fighting. The war commander walked to a wall covered with symbols. He touched one of them, and it glowed brighter. This symbol means duty, he said. It has guided my life since I was younger than you. My duty is to serve the Valith Empire, to follow orders from my superiors, to destroy the enemies of my people. But what if your superiors are wrong? Juon asked. Then I am still bound by duty, even if that duty leads to dishonor. Vexara's hand stopped moving over the symbols. Explain. G1 stepped closer to the wall. She pointed to another symbol, one that looked like two hands clasped together. This one means honor through truth, doesn't it? She said. The war commander's eyes widened slightly. How do you know that? Because I have studied your most sacred texts, the Valinor, the ancient code of warrior conduct. It says that a warrior's first duty is not to his commanders, but to truth itself. You have read the Valinor? Vexera asked in disbelief. Those writings are secret. Only our highest leaders know them. One of your communication officers quoted from them during a private message 3 months ago. I recorded it and spent weeks translating the old language. Jawan looked directly at him. The Valinor says that a warrior who follows false orders brings shame not just to himself, but to all who serve under him. The war commander was quiet for a long time. When he spoke again, his voice was softer than before. What do you want from me, human? I want you to call your officers back. I want to show them something that will change how they see this war. What could you possibly show them? Jiwon reached for her datapad. The war commander tensed, but she moved slowly to show she was not reaching for a weapon. I have recordings, she said. Communications between your political leaders on the homeworld, conversations they thought no one else could hear. She activated the device. The sound of Valith voices filled the command center. But these voices were different from the military officers. They sounded soft and comfortable, like people who had never fought in battle. The first voice spoke in the Valith language. G had prepared for this moment. This is High Counselor Marath speaking to Defense Minister Kiyahara 2 weeks before the war began, she translated. He is saying, the military leaders will resist attacking the humans. They respect strength, and the humans have shown they can fight. We must tell the military that humans are cowards and thieves, or they will refuse to attack. Vexera's face grew dark as he listened. The second voice replied, and Giwon continued translating. Defense Minister Kihara responds, what if the military discovers we lied? And High Counselor Morath says, by then, the war will be won. The military leaders care more about victory than truth. Stop, Vexera commanded. But Gaiwan continued. There is more. They discuss how to hide information about human battle tactics from their own military. They talk about editing intelligence reports to make humans sound weaker than they really are. Stop, Vexara, shouted G. One turned off the recording. They used your honor against you. They knew you would follow orders even if those orders were based on lies. The war commander stood very still. His hands were clenched into fists. Call your officers back, Giwon said gently. Let them hear this. Let them decide for themselves what honor demands. For a moment, she thought he would refuse. Then he walked to a communication panel and spoke a command in his own language. Within minutes, the command center filled with officers again. Battlemaster Veloth entered first, followed by Sub-Commander Crixon and dozens of others. They all looked confused. about being called back so quickly. Officers of the Dominion's Wrath, Vexera announced. You will listen to what the human has to say. You will listen in silence until she is finished. Battlemaster Veloth started to object, but Vexera's look silenced him. G1 activated her datapad again. This time, she played the recording from the beginning and translated every word. She played conversations about lying to the military, about hiding human strengths, about manipulating proud warriors into fighting a war the politicians were too cowardly to fight themselves. As the recordings continued, she watched the faces of the Valeth officers. She saw confusion turn to anger. She saw anger turn to shame. She saw proud warriors realizing they had been used as tools by people who did not understand honor. When the final recording ended, the command center was completely silent. Crixon was the first to speak. These voices, I recognize High Counselor Marath. I served as his bodyguard before this assignment. And I know Defense Minister Kihara's voice, said another officer. He gave me my promotion to this ship. Battlemaster Veloth looked at the tactical display showing the retreating human ships. We have been fighting an honorable enemy while believing they were cowards and thieves. Worse, said another officer. We have been the tools of cowards and thieves. War Commander Vexera walked to the center of the room. What the human says is true. We have been deceived by our own leaders. The question now is, what do we do about it? We could send these recordings to the home world, suggested Crixon. Expose the lies, and then what? Veloth asked. The politicians will deny everything. They will say the recordings are fake. They will blame us for losing the war. There is another choice, Guan said quietly. All eyes turned to her. You could choose to end this war yourselves. Not because politicians order it, but because honor demands it. How? Asked Vexera. By recognizing that humans and Valeth are not natural enemies. By admitting that this war was built on lies. By showing both our peoples that there is a different way. Battlemaster Veloth stepped forward. You ask us to betray our own government? No, Jawan replied. I ask you to serve the truth instead of lies. I ask you to follow the real Valinor, not the twisted version your politicians have given you. She looked around the room at the assembled officers. In your most sacred texts, what is the highest duty of a warrior? Sub-Commander Crixon answered quietly, to protect the innocent and serve the truth. And have you been protecting the innocent by killing human children? Have you been serving the truth by fighting a war based on lies? One by one, the Valeth officers began to lower their weapons. First Crixon, then others, until even Battlemaster Veloth let his weapon fall to his side. War Commander Vex was the last to move. He looked at his sidearm for a long moment, then slowly unclipped it from his belt and placed it on the tactical display. The silence that followed was not empty. It was full of possibility. The silence in the command center lasted for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. War Commander Vexera stood looking at his weapon on the tactical display, while his officers waited for his next order. Finally, he spoke. Communication. Officer Yexal, open a channel to all Valeth ships in the fleet. A young alien at a nearby station worked quickly at his controls. Channel open, sir. Vexera's voice filled not just the command center, but every Valeth ship in the battle group. All vessels, this is War Commander Vexera. Cease fire immediately. All weapons to standby mode. Do not engage human targets unless directly attacked. Through the tactical display, Guan could see the Valeth fleet beginning to power down their weapons. The deadly lights that had been charging for another attack went dark. Sir, Battlemaster Veloth said carefully. What do we tell the home world? We tell them the truth, Vexera replied. Something we should have done long ago. He turned to Juan. Human, your emergency beacon is still active. Your people will be looking for you. Juan checked the small device Captain Park had given her. It was indeed still blinking. Yes, sir. Contact them. Tell them that War Commander Vexera of the Valeth Empire wishes to speak with their highest commander about ending this war. Sub-Commander Crickson stepped forward. Sir, are you certain about this? Once we start down this path, there is no going back. There was no going back the moment we learned the truth, Vexera said. The only question now is whether we choose honor or continue living a lie. Jiwon activated her emergency beacon's communication function. It took several minutes, but finally she heard a familiar voice. This is Captain Minho Park of the TDF Rescue 1, Giwon. Is that really you? Yes, sir. I'm alive and unharmed. Captain, I need you to contact Admiral Nam immediately. The Valeth want to discuss a ceasefire. There was a long pause. G1, did they force you to say that? War Commander Vexera stepped closer to the communication device. Captain Park, this is War Commander Vexera. Your officer has not been coerced. She has shown us truths that we ignored for too long. I wish to speak with your fleet commander about ending hostilities. Another pause, longer this time. Stand by. While they waited, more Valeth officers began to speak quietly among themselves. Giwon listened to their conversations and realized that many of them had suspected the truth for months. They had seen humans fight with courage and protect their weak. They had wondered why their intelligence reports did not match what they saw in battle. Cadet Kim Crickson said, approaching her. May I ask you something? Of course. Why did you do this? You could have escaped with your crew. Instead, you risked everything to come here. Why? Ji-won thought about her answer. Because both our peoples deserve better than this war. Humans and Valeth are not so different. We both value courage. We both protect our families. We both want to live with honor. The only real difference is that we were told to hate each other. The communication device crackled to life again. This is Admiral Hyok-Num of the Terran Defense Fleet. Am I speaking to War Commander Vex? You are Admiral. I wish to propose an immediate ceasefire while we discuss terms for ending this conflict. War Commander, my people have been fighting yours for 3 years. Millions have died on both sides. Why should I trust you now? Vex looked at G1, then back at the communication device. Because a brave young human has shown me that this war was built on lies told by politicians who never had to fight in it. Because my honor as a warrior demands that I admit when I have been wrong. And because continuing this war serves no one. Except those who started it for their own gain. There was another long pause. Then Admiral Nom's voice returned, but it sounded different, more careful, more hopeful. What are you proposing? A meeting. You, me, and a small group of our most trusted officers, neutral ground. We will share what we have learned and decide how to move forward. War Commander Vexera looked around his command center, then made a decision that surprised everyone. Here, on my flagship, you will be my guests, under the protection of Valeth honor. No harm will come to you. Battlemaster Valoth looked shocked. Sir, that is unprecedented, Vexera finished. Yes, but these are unprecedented times. Admiral Name was quiet for a long time. Finally, he spoke. I will need to discuss this with my staff. Can you give me 2 hours? You have as long as you need, Admiral. The ceasefire will hold. After the communication ended, War Commander Vexera called his senior officers together. What we do in the coming days will be remembered for generations, he told them. We have a chance to end this war not with the destruction of one side or the other, but with something better, understanding between two peoples who should never have been enemies. The homeworld will not approve, Veloth warned. Then we will deal with the homeworld when the time comes, Vexera replied. But first, we end the killing. 2 hours later, Admiral Nam contacted them again. War Commander, I accept your invitation. I will bring Captain Park and 2 other officers. We will arrive in 4 hours. You will be welcomed with full honors. Vexera promised. As they waited for the human delegation to arrive, Giwon found herself in an unexpected position. The Valeth officers began asking her questions about human culture, about how humans saw the war, about what her people really wanted. We want the same things you want, she told them. Safety for our families. the chance to live in peace, the opportunity to build something better for our children. And if we end this war, Crixon asked, what happens then? Our peoples have fought for 3 years, there is much anger on both sides. Then we work to heal that anger, Giwan said. It will not be easy, it will take time, but it is possible. Sub-Commander Crixon nodded thoughtfully. You know, before this war began, some of our explorers met human traders at the edge of neutral space. They said humans were ... interesting. Good at solving problems. Creative we are, Giwan agreed. And from what I have learned about the Valith, you are honorable and strong. Imagine what our peoples could accomplish together instead of fighting each other. When Admiral Nom's ship finally docked with the Valith flagship, it was the first time in 3 years that humans and Valith had met in peace instead of battle. War Commander Vexera met them at the docking bay personally, something that had never happened before in Valith military history. Admiral Nam was a small, grey-haired man who looked tired from years of war, but his eyes were alert and intelligent. Admiral Vexera said, I welcome you aboard the Dominion's Wrath. You and your officers are under my personal protection. War Commander, Admiral Nam, replied, I hope this is the beginning of something better for both our peoples. Captain Park rushed to Giwan and hugged her tightly. I can't believe you're alive. What you did was crazy and dangerous and ... And it worked. Giwan finished with a smile. Yes, he said, looking around at the Valith officers who were watching with curiosity rather than hostility. It worked. The negotiations took 3 days. They were not easy. There were arguments and misunderstandings. There were moments when it seemed like the talks would fail. But every time things got difficult, someone would remember why they were there. They would remember the recordings of politicians lying to their own military. They would remember the faces of soldiers who had died fighting a war built on deception. They would remember that both sides had lost too much already. In the end, they agreed on more than just a ceasefire. They agreed on a joint investigation into how the war had started. They agreed on prisoner exchanges and medical aid for the wounded. They agreed on communication protocols to prevent future misunderstandings. Most importantly, they agreed that War Commander Vexera and Admiral Num would return to their home worlds together, as partners in peace rather than enemies. In war, 6 months later, Guan stood on the bridge of the New Horizon, the first ship to be jointly crewed by humans and Valith. She wore the uniform of a lieutenant in the newly formed Terran-Valith alliance, with Battlemaster Veloth as his tactical advisor. It was strange to see former enemies working together, but it was also hopeful. Lieutenant Kim, Captain Park called from his command chair, we're receiving a transmission from the Kepler colony. They're ready for the first joint settlement mission. Jiwa smiled as she opened the communication channel. In the months since the war ended, humans and Valith had discovered they had more in common than anyone had expected. They were both explorers at heart. They both dreamed of spreading life to distant stars. This is Lieutenant Ji-1 Kim of the Alliance ship New Horizon, she said into the communicator. We are on our way. As their ship jumped to faster-than-light speed, heading toward humanity's first joint colony with an alien species, Ji-1 thought about the moment that had changed everything, the moment when she decided to crash her fighter into an enemy ship instead of running away. Sometimes, she realized the most important battles were not won with weapons. Sometimes, the greatest victories came from having the courage to try something completely different. Behind them, Earth and the Valith homeworld were learning to work together. Ahead of them, the stars waited to be explored by 2 species who had chosen friendship over fear. The war was over. The future had begun.